Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Wednesday panel, Expanding Definitions of Theater for Young Audiences. My name is Giana, and I will be your moderator today. Before we jump in, though, we want to do a land acknowledgement. Although we sit here in virtual space separated by our geographical distance, we want to acknowledge the first people of this land where we create and tell stories. And acknowledge that they're still with us. So we acknowledge and pay respects to the Carrizo and Comecrudo, Huahuatecan, Caddo, Tonkawa, Comanche, Lipan Apache, Alabama Cushata, Kickapoo, Tigua Pueblo, and all the American Indian and Indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have become a part of these lands and territories in Texas, here on Turtle Island, which is now known as North America. We will begin today's panel by sharing introductions that include our names, pronouns, where we are located. So if you're zooming in from somewhere that is not Austin, Texas, a brief physical description and how we intersect with the New Works Festival. So I'll go ahead and start and do some modeling for that. So hello, my name is Giana Blazquez. I use she, her pronouns. I am a second year MFA candidate in the Drama and Theater for Youth and Communities program here at UT Austin. And I am on the dramaturgy committee for the New Works Festival. I am zooming in specifically from the land of the Humanos, Tonkawa, Lipan Apache, Huahuatecan, and Comanche people here in Austin, Texas. I identify as a director and choreographer for and with young people. I'm a mixed race Latino woman with olive skin. I have brown hair that's tied back in a bun and curtain bangs that are curled, and a white and yellow striped button-up shirt. And I will pass it to Jen to go next.
Oh, thanks, Giana. Hi there, y'all. Jen Hartmann Luck. Also here, sitting in Austin, Texas, and grateful to be learning so much more about the First Nations and specifically the Oaxacan folks and the peoples of this land is so important. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Caucasian woman, a white woman wearing glasses and having lots of graying hair. It's my witch. I love this. I'm gonna get to play some serious roles soon. This is what I'm working for. But I've got lots of hair going on. I'm wearing a black top and a pink sweater over, and I'm grateful to be here. I identify these days as a singer-songwriter, composer, theater educator, theater maker, mother. And most recently, I spent almost a decade as the director of education and partnerships and programming at the Paramount Theater here in Austin. Also on the board of the International Performing Arts for Youth, as well as on faculty at UT, teaching the Theater for Young Audiences course a few times. So, and in regards to the festival, I'm just thrilled I get to watch some work and speak to incredible artists and engage with you all today. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Deb, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Deborah Wicks Puma. I'm calling in from Southern California, San Diego, the ancestral land of the Tongva people, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a pale, middle-aged Latina woman with blue eyes, wavy brown hair, and today I'm wearing big old studio headphones and a plain black shirt. And I am a composer for TYA. I've been doing that for about 25 years. And I was invited to participate in the festival as a member of the larger theater community. So I'm so excited to be invited into this vibrant community. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And Shavonne.
Hello, my name is Shavonne Coleman, she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I would like to acknowledge that I am on the ancestral land. Not only am I on it, but I am laboring, I am living, I am loving on the land of the Humanos people. And let's see, I am a Black woman with a naturally very kinky curly puff, leopard brimmed glasses, cassette tape earrings, a button-up shirt with a gray sweatshirt on top that says got privilege. And on the back, it says something very lovely, but I don't remember what it says. But I love this shirt because of the lovely thing on the back. And I am a performing and teaching artist. I would love to call myself a director and a writer as well. And I am a lecturer in the theater department here at University of Texas at Austin. I'm on my way jumping in and out. I used to be the theater for dialogue specialist, but I've transferred into an actually non-theater related position, which makes me sad, although I love my new position. And so that's kind of how I intersect. Is I am involved with TYA as an organization. I was on the BIPOC advisory board, and lots, I don't know, that's me. I'm just gonna stop there.
That's great, Shavonne. Thank you. And thanks everyone for that. So let's jump right in. The title of this panel is Expanding Definitions of Theater for Young Audiences, right? So as we're working to expand these definitions, why don't we start with how you define theater for young audiences? Why do you choose to situate your work in this field?
Well, I'll jump in. I define theater for young audiences as stories that are centered on youth issues, that are created specifically for that audience. And I think that they can feel that too, that we care enough about them to really write these for them. Of course, we hope that they're entertaining and thought-provoking to anyone of any age. But again, focusing on the youth. And what I love about it is that usually the stories are hopeful, they're energetic, and they're super efficient in their storytelling. So we have to tell a full story with characters, with arcs, with songs, dance breaks, whatever it is. And we usually do it within 60 minutes. So you have to take out the air, right? You have to take out the fluff. And this is what I love about it. It really distills storytelling down to its essence. And again, really that part about it being hopeful is something that I love because maybe it's because I'm a musical theater person too, but I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful. So even as we deal with hard issues, and we do often deal with hard issues, difficult issues, hopefully we're coming from a hopeful place.
Lately I've been thinking a lot, and this is going to age me, so some people may not know what I'm talking about, but the name brand FUBU, which stood for us, by us, right? And so I think of TYA as young people involved, either it's for them or it's by them. So I think of it as youth theater, which is typically I define as youth that have either written it, devised it, or perform it, or children's theater, which is typically adults for children, but also could be intergenerational. It gets muddy for me because I'm also an applied theater practitioner, and I think a lot of that crosses over into TYA, and it's hard for me to separate that or cut that apart, right? But I think of the theaters that are happening in the church basements. I think of theater that is happening in the rec centers. I think of the theater that, anything that involves young people in some way, shape, or form along the process, right? Is TYA. And so what's exciting to me about that is, in general, it often is very community led or feels very community led. And I just love community engagement and community development. And I myself was in a youth theater as a young person. So that was my first understanding of theater. And I didn't know it was like TYA. Like I didn't know until I was well into adulthood I had never heard TYA, right? I was just like, I'm a teenager doing theater. Thank you. And so those experiences inform like why I'm so partial to it, right? Because at an early age, I got to participate in this art form in a very serious way. My directors, my acting coaches, my mentors always treated me as equal. And that idea of like equity when you're doing things, when you're creating things, is important to me and has carried on with me. And so that's one of the reasons I love TYA.
That's awesome. Oh gosh, I mean, yes to everything. This idea of stories centered around youth issues, stories centered around child characters. I think so often the stories that I'm most drawn to in the TYA space, and even my own children are drawn to, are stories that involve children, and something's happening with these kids and they are deeply engaged in what's going on. Obviously, there's an entire genre of our work that is adaptations of books. And my 5 and 7-year-old, they are my test market. They are my test kitchen, y'all. It's been great. It's been great. As I am making and writing and creating new work for young audiences. I wrote a song just this morning and my daughter was like, I don't know, Mom. And I was like, okay, tell me more, right? And she thinks I'm getting upset. And I said, no, I want your voices. I want to know how you're responding. How do you see yourself? And I'll tell this really quick little snippet about that. I was writing a song about listen to your children, and she's like, "Well, is this for children, Mom?" And I said, "Well, yeah. I'm hoping the audience would be children." And she goes, "Well, we don't have children, so it needs to be listen to the children." And my son, 5, goes, "We're gonna have kids someday, Mom, but we don't have kids yet, so it needs to be listen to the children, not listen to your children." And I said, "Got it. Okay." And I just think they are listening. They see, they hear, they want to see themselves. They want to see how they're going to interact. And I often, to kind of shift just a smidge, I often think of the moment that I understood what professional theater for young audiences was when I was an undergraduate at Arizona State. And I was working in the box office at the Herberger Theater Center, which was the home at the time of Child's Play of Tempe, Arizona. And they had premiered with Seattle, Stephen Dietz is Still Life with Iris. And I remember falling into that show. It was a total accident. I didn't know what it was. I knew nothing about Child's Play. And I saw this play and this story and this design and the heart and the meat. And it was a rich, beautiful world that had been created. And I thought it was one of the best things I had ever seen, period. And I was still a young theater goer at that time, but I'd been pretty, fortunate to see a lot of work. And I just was so drawn to this idea that young people, want to see themselves in complicated, difficult stories on stage, and they deserve a design. They deserve incredibly talented artists and performers on stage and stories that are really deep and powerful. And so, yeah, that's kind of a lot going on there, but that's my answer, Giana.
I think it's also that young people are still defining who they are, how they see the world. They're trying to make sense of it. And as adults, we think we have figured it all out. And of course we haven't. And so every time I dive into these TYA pieces, it again sort of breaks that open for me personally. But that's where kids live. And I think that's also why it's so intriguing and it's such a wonderful place to be in, of like, how do I see the world? How do I want to build the world? And who am I going to be? Yeah. And we don't have to stop doing that when we're grown-ups, but kids are really living in that reality.
Yeah, Debbie, you're making me think a little bit about, I'm like trying to bring messiness back into my work, right? Because as an adult, I have been taught, right, like you need to live in this perfect thing and everything needs to be the way that it's supposed to be, right? But with working with kids, you're right, like we get this reminder that like it's okay to be messy and play and experiment, right? So kind of with experimentation, all of you are involved in creating new work for young audiences in some capacity, right? So I'm curious, how do young people and communities play a role in your creation process?
Well, I can chime in first in just that now that I really do. And I said it as a joke, but my own children have become such a critical part of me as a mother. What do I want to be feeding the soul of my children? What do they get excited about, and then I truly do. Now they're old enough, I test everything in front of them, and it's really wonderful because I think that having that voice, especially right now when we're not getting to go out into communities and workshop things and go into classrooms, and it's just such a joy to have very young children in my universe at the moment, every day, all the time. But I was also going to say, I've been so fortunate to be working very closely with Susan Zeder over the past 4 or 5 years on a lot of new projects. And one of the things that Susan has really put deep into her practice, and thus now as a part of our work together, we workshop the pieces in front of youth audiences very early on, very, very early on. Like you said, when it's still messy. We've turned it over to youth ensembles to explore the work and to play with the work. And I, as a composer, I'm like, well, that song is not holding up. Okay, we've got some work to do, right? Like that is critical. If your song only holds up when you've got the absolute best and the best vocalist, then and so it's really an incredibly fruitful process just from a logistics point of just being able to see, but the holistic and the spiritual part of having young people's voices and hands just all over the work, it just really, really helps to kind of make you feel like you're on the right path and that you're telling the right stories, and you see quickly. Debbie, I feel like I heard you speaking just recently. So often the youth audiences are gonna we know this. They're the first to tell us when it's not working. But as performers, when they're standing on stage with the material too, and they're like, I don't even know, why am I saying this? That's really important. That's a really important moment for a young actor to say, I don't understand this. I don't know why I'm saying this. That is really important.
Yeah, I was gonna go there next too, Jen. The idea, right? They say out of the mouth of babes, or like I was talking just the other day about how honest young people are. Like they're just honest, and the idea of like when you think about the wonderful thing about TYA is oftentimes you get to play and push boundaries on like suspending belief, right? Like Deborah said, you usually have these 60 minutes to get it done, and so you're trying to figure out how to push those boundaries but still make it work and make it feel good and still tell the story. But also like young people and even community members, like you brought up community members too, that are not like theater practitioners will often be like, what? This doesn't, I can't, like, right? Like this isn't working. This is too far, right? And so it's a new level of trust with these folks, with these young people, with young artists, with community members to say, okay, we're going to like push it even a little bit further, or we're going to push this a little bit further and see what happens. Like, let's just see what comes out of it. So that, and then I also wanted to talk a little bit to which Jen talked about a little bit is like the holistic person, right? And so I am kind of deeply right now rooted in education, and there's a lot that comes in around like trauma and how we learn and development. And I wish I could remember this scholar's name, but I cannot. But this person, it was like a person I was reading, and they study trauma, and they were saying how in this village, there was like famine happening, and it was not a long-term famine, it was short-term. And all that they did a study on the women who were pregnant, and their babies had more health issues because the children basically were listening from the womb, right? Like they prepared their body for famine, but then got out and there was no famine. And so they tended to have more health issues with like high blood pressure, diabetes, things of this nature, right? Because their body, they were told, they were listening before they were even born, oh no, it's gonna be a famine, right? Prepare. And so it's interesting, but when I think about TYA, I think about, well, like the whole person, right? Like yes, it's separate and we talk about it, but it's also the same, because the things we grow up learning and engaging in, and we already start to create our aesthetic, and do we love theater or hate theater and all these things, right? And so it's almost like, I don't know, it's just this interesting part of like that, like you said, it's like holistic person, people. TYA is part of the journey for all of us, and like to be able to go back to it and have fun and challenge ourselves, like Deborah said earlier, to like break out of some of the things we've been socialized to do versus what we might have done 20 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, right? And so yeah, those were just resonating with me, so I just wanted to tap on those.
I was just going to say that, I mean, this is prior to the pandemic, but I had noticed a shift in the way that we developed new works, that there was more of a conscious effort to invite young people in to the development process. Like earlier in my career, the first time kids would really interact with it was during previews, which is really late in the development process, right? You can make changes and adapt it to your audience, but by that point you can't do quite much. So But in the last couple of shows I've done, maybe within the past 5 years, during the development process, when we have that first workshop, they're bringing kids in, and they're often kids of the theater that you're working at. They're the kids of the employees or whatever, which is great because they're theater kids and they know what's going on. And they're so smart. And I really love that. I really love that because I think sometimes, even though we are TYA artists, there can be a real disconnect. And again, by the time you get to previews, it's kind of too late. You have to be conscious and thinking about them the whole time.
And I wanted to say, because I think I've done a lot more devising with young people than I have of writing. And I want to do more writing, but my experience is more devising. And so I think even the difference in like the few times I sat down and wrote a play versus devising, for me, my brain is like, wait a minute, you need to hear some voices and you need to hear people and you want to see people play. And so just acknowledging that it's almost weird to me because I started learning to devise as a teenager and then went into like assistant positions. And so I didn't even really understand what devising was. And that's the way I prefer to write because it's so many, like you get to hear it early, like they're saying, right? You get to see it early. You get to see people play with it. And so, yeah, it's an interesting term for me to be trying to do more writing that's not involved in devising because it is this hunger to say, like, let me get it in front of people as soon as possible, please.
Yeah, I hear all of us talking a little bit about this weird dynamic that happens in the theater for young audiences field where you have adults creating work for young people, right? So there's inherently this disconnect through age, right? And we're also dealing with what our own constructions of childhood are and what constructions of childhood are coming in from society, right? And are we speaking to those or are we pushing against those? So I'm curious, how do you decide what new work to create when you're creating new work?
I like to create when people pay me to create because it's a job and I'm grateful for it.
That's fair.
And Debbie gets paid, y'all. She gives us all hope. She gives us all hope. When I have questions about contracts or lawyers, I call Deborah Wicks Puma. Just saying. Am I wrong? I mean, she's like my personal like.
I mean, I love art and I care deeply about what I do, but it's also a profession and I'm a professional and it's a job, right? And yeah, that's all I need. That's what I'm saying.
Totally valid.
I found myself for a lot of years struggling. My thesis was even about this, struggling about this space that I live in as a teaching artist and an arts educator, as an administrator, as an education director, and an artist, one who creates work. And it goes deep for me. And it speaks a little, Shavonne, to what you were saying is for a lot of years, it felt that I wasn't actually making work that was worthy, valid, if it didn't have kind of this applied approach, right? This devised approach. I needed to be in the classroom. It had to be with the kids. I was the best version of myself if I was in a servant's role, if you will. Not servant, pardon, service role. And I am so proud of that work and that ethic that I've kind of cultivated in myself because I believe so much in the power of the arts in spaces with young people and in communities and the stories that can be told. And I really had to kind of give myself permission to be an artist as well. And, and it's been a challenge, but I think when, I at this time have been opening up and there's so much work coming my way. Some of it's adaptation, some of it is new work. I do right now, mostly everything that I'm working on is in a partnership with a playwright. And I'm working as composer and lyricist. but also as a singer-songwriter, you know, I work on a lot of original work, and I'm starting this new project that has just been so exciting because it is blending my devising and ethnography background. I'm interviewing kids and I'm writing songs about them, and it's just turning out to be just the most invigorating and thrilling project. And I've allowed it to be a vehicle for myself, but also I'm getting to step inside this work that I care so deeply about, connecting with kids, telling their stories, lifting up young people. And so it's a challenge to kind of decide. I think that I'm letting it kind of come right now. And just organically following it. And it's been a really lovely process inside of COVID to kind of allow myself to do that, for sure.
And there's this bit of duality, I feel like, that where of what both of you all are saying, right? Like I have and probably still have this thing where I love devising and I love ethnography, and it feeds me, and I love that community. And also I want to get paid. And like I have tons of plays that I've devised or adapted because I needed to, like, especially when you're working. I'm from Detroit. So when you're like going into a classroom or into a rec center or whatever with these young artists, and you don't know how many are going to show up. So you can't pick a play beforehand because you have no clue who it is going to be, 3 or 30. And through the process, you end up writing something. But then also, like, if it's devised, I'm not going to publish it or try to get it published because there were so many little voices in there that it feels unfair to be like, Shavonne wrote this. Or really, really early on, don't tell anybody. I would adapt things, and I would then got grown up artists and was like, I didn't get rights for that. And didn't even know that was a thing. And so not coming to this point where I'm like, oh, I'm not published, and it's hard to continue to say, oh, I'm a writer, and loving that work, completely loving having done that for the service of those young people having an amazing time or learning or growing. And then on the other end of it now being like, yes, and I also have to get paid, so I have to figure out how to navigate these different things, and what's valid, what feels valid, and payment provides validity, and all these layers and things. So like Jenn said, it's at this point, it's a pandemic, and it's like, what is coming to me right now? I want to sit down and write, and I want to do this, but also if I am taking time to be a teaching artist, maybe that's what I need to do right now. And so it's about what is coming to, and with lots of hope for that after the pandemic. I don't want to say it's over because it's going to end very slowly. It's going to be a process. But as this process starts to open up for us, there's a lot of hope that means there's going to be a lot more opportunity and creativity and development of things.
Yeah, Shavonne, you segued so nicely into our next question. So I'm going to pose it to all of you. In thinking about the pandemic and this past year, right, everybody in the theater field, not just theater for young audiences, but everybody has been asked or forced almost to expand their definitions of theater. So what are some exciting shifts that you've seen within theater for young audiences, and where are the gaps or the places that you hope we continue to grow?
One of the things I love is that access has become has always been very important, but it has become more immediate, right? I think prior to this, people have been thinking about it, and some people have put it at the forefront, definitely, but the number or percentage, right, in comparison to our field has been very small. And so access, and access in general, right? Yes, when we're talking about ability and when we're talking about neurodivergence and things like this, but also we're starting to think about social economic background, and we're starting to think about all the things, right? And so it's become more immediate and more prominent, and people are, yes, playing with that because of the pandemic, but people are also saying, what does this look like after the pandemic? How do we hold on to this? This is a great time to start or try some things that we might not have done before in the past, right? And so that alone to me is interesting, right? More than like the actual outcome or the actual product, right? Is that people are thinking about it and doing it and putting stuff out there that maybe before they might have been hesitant about, or took kind of crawled to, instead of, really getting there, getting into it and going.
Yeah, I feel like TYA theaters have learned so much about expanding their audiences and again reaching new people that they never had before that I'm hopeful that once we go back to live performances, they will not let it'll be a yes and, right? They'll continue to have that and do their in person. I was talking to a theater the other day about them wanting to just double down on live theater and what that means to be interactive. And so they were talking about having the audience not in a proscenium setting and not even in a theater of the round, but actually have seats within the set so that the actors might have to move a kid out of the way to sit down or, but like this is something that is so unique to theater that you can't get from watching a screen at a movie, so it's like proscenium seating. That's something they can get with a different kind of experience. So what is it essentially that theater can provide that those other ones can't? And I thought that was really a smart way to start thinking about it. The other thing that I'm thinking about as we're coming out of this, I feel like everyone has, if not everyone is thinking broader about issues of race, about issues of diversity, and I'm hopeful that as we move forward, we're going to be seeing more season choices that are leaning into that and hopefully not fearful of like, I've got to program this big title because we need money, and sort of falling back on the old patterns. And maybe they'll just need to find what that balance is. Everyone's trying to figure out how to survive, but also how to create that new reality. And I think there is going to be a new reality.
Yeah, I'd love to answer that question with my arts education, my education director and programmer hat on. So the role of a programmer at a theater like the Paramount Theater, we don't produce work at the Paramount Theater on stage necessarily. It's often touring companies that come from all over the country. Sometimes they come from the Kennedy Center, and they're written by Deborah Wicks, Puma. And sometimes we are getting incredible work from Australia, from the UK. I'm getting, when I was presenting at the Paramount, the Paramount is kind of a current day vaudeville space. I mean, it's film, it's not television, film, live theater, music, lots of music, obviously, at the Paramount. Comedy has become a huge thing. There would be circus at the Paramount. So oftentimes I was looking at all the different types of work that could come and we could feature on stage for families and schools. Most of the time, youth and family-based stuff was, in fact, book-based, theater-based, dance and or music-based as a rule. And so what I've been seeing, and in the conversations from the programming side of things, what the presenters are receiving from artists right now has been fascinating, because there are some theater companies that what they were able to accomplish right now during this time was finding that archival footage from their shows that were really good archival versions, and getting all of the approvals in place so that they could share that and just stream it. Some folks have gone back in and refilmed in very artistic cinematic ways their pieces. Some have completely created new types of work, which is really exciting to see. Some have been asynchronous, some have been synchronous, some are finding, there's some colleagues at the Telecenter in Long Island, at Long Island University. They have this huge menu of options. Do you want it a synchronous experience? Do you want asynchronous? And there's just all these different programs available that artists have kind of turned around and figured out how to do something new in this time. There are some artists who have just said, this is not theater, I'm taking a pause, and I honor that. I get it. One of the things that has been really interesting for me, though, are the artists. So again, I would travel and I would see artists and I would watch their work and I would decide if they were a good match for the Paramount. And there was one artist, she was a singer-songwriter. She did a lot of pre-K, early education kind of music programs. I think she came from preschool. She played lots of instruments, would get on stage and do this really great interactive thing. And it was lovely and fun. But she was out of Brooklyn, and it felt still pretty kind of classroom based. It didn't quite feel like it was a fit for the Paramount stage yet. You know what I'm saying? So I loved her. I thought she was lovely, but I wasn't going to be booking her, bringing her out to Austin, try to sell 1,200 seats. Okay. Well, a few months ago, I saw her present on a showcase for youth and family musicians, and her name is she performs under Mills Trills, and she has created. Do you know Mills Trills, Debbie? No, okay. She's created an interactive online presence now that is so phenomenal that I was like, sister, you figured it out. You should be doing TV. You should be doing web series. You should be, because she really created. It almost felt like Blues Clues meets really kind of hip, cool music education. She would have a guest come in. She would do. I was like, this is awesome, awesome, awesome. And somehow, and I mean, maybe I haven't seen her super recently and knowing exactly where she was at right when COVID hit, but the level of production, the level of presentation was so strong that I was like, what I hope for some artists is that they realize there's a whole new space, there's a whole new pool for them to swim in. And you know, many of the artists and the companies that I'm talking to, which I mean, we heard from everybody so far, I mean, they're holding on to everything. Because maybe now we can serve more of these communities that can never get the buses to come. Maybe we can present more of these artists that we normally wouldn't book for the 1,200 seat house at the Paramount. But maybe now we have this really cool interactive opportunity. I mean, it's been really fruitful, I would argue, overwhelming and scary and hard, but really fruitful, I think, for a lot of artists.
That's really exciting to hear, and gives me hope, right? To hear that in conversations that y'all are having with companies, that they are planning to keep this, right? That is exciting. Yeah, as an artist who's coming up through the field, for sure. I'm going to do a quick intro to our Q&A function. We're going to open it up in just a moment for anybody who is watching. So if you feel like you have a question for any of these lovely panelists and you want to engage with us, you're going to use the Q&A function through Vimeo. So if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a header that says Ask a Question. It has a little question mark next to it and then a text box under it. So if you're currently in full screen, you're going to need to minimize your video to access this function. In order to ask a question or give a comment, you type your response in that text box that says type your question here. Then you're going to hit the dark blue and white arrow to the right of your response. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment anonymously, then there's a button for you to do that. And note that your question might be shared on screen to public as you're asking. So while folks are kind of figuring that out, my last question from me is what artistic modes or narratives are on your horizon? What's next for you, and how can we follow and stay in tune with what you're making?
I'll go. I'm right now I'm in rehearsals for a show called Unmuted that I'm writing with Alvaro Sad Rios for First Stage Milwaukee. And it's my first time working on a new show on Zoom. And oh my gosh, it's a steep learning curve, y'all. I had to try and teach a song and I'm like, I mean, the whole thing is set in a Zoom classroom, so it's like art imitating life. But anyhow, I am humbled by the technical process of it, but I think it's going to be really, really fun. And we're working with high school students, so of course they're way ahead of us. But that has been an incredible learning experience for me. And I'm also writing What Do You Do with an Idea for Bay Area Children's Theater with lovely Adam Tobin as my playwright lyricist. And that's based on the book by Kobe Yamada. And I'm doing another show for Palo Alto Children's Theater. So, yay! Got a couple of things in the hopper.
Debbie's all over the place.
I don't know. If you want me to do something, let me know. My Instagram is SHAV_T_artivist. I try to post things there if I'm going to do them, and realize while I was saying that I did not post this there. Shame on me. But I am with Grand Rapids Civic Theater. I'm working on a project with them about equity in theater education. So I'm working on that. And then I am working on Jose Casas and Tiffany Trent are editing a anthology for TYA for Black folks And I'll be writing a chapter in that. So that's a little while out. But so I'm doing a little bit of writing in that sense and working on equity in this field. But I am hoping to be doing some artistic stuff soon. Don't have anything on my plate, but my plate is open. I got 2 plates, 2 double fisted. So let me know.
Fill Shavonne's plate, y'all. Fill it.
I love that. Sometimes it's like we're spinning the plates, right? Yeah. There's so many plates. So the next big project that Susan and I are really getting into the final chapters on is our musical, The Battlefields of Clara Barton, which has been in development now for about 3-4 years. UT has been really incredible and a part of that development process over the years, which has been wonderful. And it was meant to be workshopped at the American Music Theater Project in May of 2020. And we weren't so sure what that meant. The American Music Theater Project is a pretty robust new musical development program attached with Northwestern University. And luckily, they were very, very supportive in wanting us back. So it looks as if we will be in person in October of 2021 with the Northwestern folks, which is just so, so wonderful. So that is a full-scale 2-act musical, which is really overwhelming and wonderful and exciting and hard. Have I said it's hard? It's also hard, yo. I'm also working with Jose Casas. Actually, he and I are stirring up some business, which is very exciting. We're in the very beginning stages of that, but starting to work on a musical with him. I'm working on a new musical play project with former MFA playwright Holly Gibson, who was in my cohort when I was a graduate student at the University of Texas in the way back over 10 years ago now. It's kind of crazy to think about. But and then also I've been so thrilled to get to start working on a new project with Roxanne Schroeder Arce and the Magic Theater and a couple of our dear artistic collaborators here at UT, hoping to get Karen and J.E. from the Applied Arts folks involved, getting more folks from the department involved, but and a songwriting project about these kids that I'm doing. I mean, it's just, I've really just said yes. I've just started saying yes to a lot of things. And I've been really grateful because it is keeping me busy.
Awesome. Lots of good stuff around, everyone. So keep your eyes on these folks. I have a really great question that came through. I'm curious of who is considered a young audience. How do we approach this expansively?
I'll take that because that was a conversation we'd have in my TYA undergraduate course with the theater education students that would be a part of that. What is a young audience, right? I think at this stage of the game, I will call a young audience 0 to 25. And I think that there are definite buckets, right? There are segments. The very young, we are calling that now theater for the very young. This work that is sometimes called baby theater, sometimes called theater for the very young. Work that is slightly less story-based, but is very engaging for littles to deeply submerge themselves into this work that is so exciting and often beautifully orchestrated and designed. And then kind of what I would argue the traditional bucket, which is that lower, middle, upper elementary space when we're talking about professional TYA, the adaptations of children's books, the stuff that are the field trips, all the kids that are coming on their buses with the schools to the big performing arts centers. A lot of that, the heavy lifting is in elementary school. I would say middle school is probably the space that needs it the most and doesn't get enough because it's hard. It's hard to do it right. It's hard to do it real. It's hard to sell it to those middle school teachers to make them believe that it's worth them getting out of school to see the great work. But those pieces that address preteen and teen issues in that middle school bucket, man, when folks do that right, it is such powerful, beautiful work. And then when you start getting into high school, and that's why I say up to 25. I mean, I think that you're still a young person, even as an undergraduate, even as you're starting your life as a young adult. There is this work that bridges becoming young adults. And I think those topics, again, if we're still centered on a young person and we're centered on issues that are germane to those young people, I really do think that there is space to kind of go all the way up. But so that's, I'm kind of that's kind of it. But, I know that the traditional, and I don't know, Debbie, you were speaking, but I saw Debbie speak at another session like a week and a half ago. So I was on a panel, I was watching her on a panel. And what you want to talk a little bit, especially from the commercial side of things.
Well, I think, third through fifth grade is kind of the golden age, and where, at least for me, so much of my work has been focused. But I was also going to say, like, by the time they get to middle school and high school, they are able to really perform their own TYA. And that's where I feel like it's transitioned, right? That is the magic time where kids are more interested in creating the theater themselves than sitting back and watching theater. And that's where I think it really is transformative. Like the shows that I've written for third through fifth graders have now been created, and some of them have been, made into junior versions or something like that, so that they're performed now by middle and high school and university students. Actually, a lot of universities are now doing some of my TYA shows, and it's so fabulous. And I'm thinking about a show I did, She Persisted, where it's these amazing American women, and I am so excited for the middle school production of that show to happen, because I know, like, we all probably started as actors, or that's sort of how we got into theater, and the impact that has to perform a character that you look up to, or to embody whoever that person is, it's huge, and it stays with you forever. So that's kind of one of the areas that I love and I'm really excited about.
I love that.
Y'all are like poking a little bit at my thesis project, so I'm excited. I'm looking at how to bring theater for the very young practices into middle school, right? So
that's
keep an eye out.
awesome.
Yeah. So how do we make a sensory immersive space for them?
That's very cool.
We have another question. What is your experience of theater for young audiences and self or independent production? Are large institutions and schools dominant in theater for young audiences?
I would again just say, like, it depends on where the paycheck is coming from. Mm-hmm. And I am open to all venues, if it's writing for kids. I mean, this is sort of my joke of, like, you have a job? Oh, I can do that. Absolutely. Write for kids, write for grown-ups, write for this? Yes. Tell me, I'll do it. So I don't think there's a limitation on where these opportunities are coming from, if you're kind of open to playing anything.
Yeah, and I think from, like, facilitating your own work and getting things done, when it comes to schools, a lot of school districts, they want to contract with the known entity, right? They want to contract with the sure bet, if you will. It's safer. It's easier on administration. It's easier on parents and families. But we in Austin are very fortunate, because we do have the Creative Learning Initiative here, and there has been a big effort to try and make space in our schools for artists who are not a part of larger arts organizations. And that has been a really hopeful shift that is not happening in every community. So we are very fortunate here. Our kids are very fortunate, because they're getting access to artists who are making work on their own, from their own production spaces, from their own pocketbooks. They are making work that matters to them, often with maybe more of a, I mean, not always, but more of a social justice bent, more of a arts education, theater in education angle. A lot of our colleagues in town who are doing this work and now are able to get those contracts at the school districts, because it used to be literally like you had to like break down walls with sledgehammers to try and get into these institutions. And so, I think it's important for students, young people, to get to see work at Zach Theater and see work at the Kennedy Center and First Stage Milwaukee, but it's also really important for them to see that solo performance artist who does incredible puppetry work, and they come in and it's simple and it's scaled down and it's about that connection. I mean, we want our kids exposed to all of it and all art forms as well. You know, you don't want to limit just based on who are the large arts organizations in town. You want that cultural world dance. You want the puppeteering. You want all this great stuff. So I'm really hopeful when I see a model like what's happening in Austin School District of artists being invited to the table, and seeing it from both perspectives. And budget is always, you know, the budgets are often bigger when they come from the larger entities because they have more of a machine. But it'll be interesting, I think, you know, to see Deborah, you talked about it after kind of post Black Lives Matter, post COVID, post everything, what the funding for some new work is going to hopefully start looking like, you know. Hopefully there's a little more of a spread of some of that money.
And I was going to say too, when you're thinking about starting something off or getting involved, also think about how to connect with like organizations like TYA USA or AATE, or places that have fellowships or internships that are going to help you kind of explore what does that even look like for you, right? Like what does it look like to try to do projects on your own, or who should you talk to, who's out in the field doing it already. But then also, if you are even local and community organizations, if you're, for example, volunteering there, right? I've stumbled upon projects sometimes where I going to do volunteering for something else, like, and then someone says, oh, you do theater, let's do this devising project. And I'm like, okay, great, right? And so you almost never know where it's going to come from, especially because you have this skill set that sometimes, like Jen said, in Austin, we're lucky, but in sometimes some spaces, some cities, there's not a lot of budget for that. There's not a lot of space for that. But there are other community organizations, identities, social services organizations that would love to do this kind of work and maybe don't know much about it. So connect, talk about the work you love. Sometimes people will give you opportunities to try it out. So look for those opportunities to try it out as well. And know that, yes, we're working up to hopefully getting paid and budget and all those things. But sometimes little budgets and playing around in projects are going to help you get to that point.
And I would also just encourage you to not be shy, because like literally even now, after doing this for 25 years, I will just walk into a theater and just be like, hi, I do music. Do you need music? Here's my resume. Let's work together. You know, there's no point in being shy. And I think in TYA particularly, it's a wonderful community. It's a welcoming community. And you people will give you the benefit of the doubt. People will give you an opportunity if there is an opportunity. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I love working in this field. It's just nice folks. So just don't be shy.
Y'all, I have to tell you, the only reason I have been able to make this shift in my own career was because there was going to be a song slam at TYA USA facilitated. I actually didn't even know who was facilitating it, to be honest, because I'd been so kind of removed from that part of the work. And I had this song that I was working on for a new project, and I didn't even have the music for it yet. I literally just had an audio recording of my awkward voice on an iPhone memo. Y'all, it was embarrassing. I've never been more embarrassed. And I submitted it to Deborah Wicks Puma, it turns out. And, you know, the answer was yes, let's do this thing, right? And it literally was the catalyst to Gretel the Musical happening, finishing, becoming what it became, and it's now a published piece and it's being licensed all over the country. And, you know, I think sometimes we're so afraid to just try and, you know, when we're starting something, you know, and I wasn't new to composing and songwriting, but new to this, you know, new to like making it moving in this direction, right? And I felt very embarrassed and nervous. And, you know, so that story still, you know, makes me laugh to think about, but it, you know, you just have to, you walk in those doors, you submit your stuff, you put it on the table. And I love what you said, Debbie, about our field, Theater for Young Audiences, we're searching for more artist colleagues. We're searching for people with new ideas and new backgrounds and new experiences to like help us tell the stories that our kids want to hear, you know?
Awesome, y'all. Jen, can you give us a little bit of clarification on post Black Lives Matter? Are you just like talking about like post the visibility of it and not saying like that's a movement that will end, right?
Not even close. I'm talking about the what I hope is now a new direction in the way funding for our work has been seen. So often, large organizations get all the money, and I want to see a world in our field, all of our the performing arts, where just the money that is available for artists starts to diversify. And I want to be a part of that and a part of that process. Sorry if that was not clear. Thank you.
No, all good. So just
Thank you for clarifying.
The visibility of the movement, right? And
absolutely, that is what I was discussing.
Yeah. The mobilizing and organizing that has happened in the past year is hopefully going to move the funding. Yeah.
Thank you.
Worries. Thank you. Yeah, all good. Okay. I want to do a quick round. Last question. A single moment of a TYA show that shook you. Was it story, character, relationship, aesthetics, context?
That's really hard. Okay. I think I got one. I mean, there's like a gazillion of them. This is like asking me to go into my closet and, pick a shirt. No, I'm just kidding. There was a moment where we did a relaxed performance of Oliverio, which is Oliver Twist set in Brazil. And there's a moment where the young girl, who's sort of the character of Oliver, sings to the ocean, and she's singing to the goddess of the ocean called Iemanjá. And she's singing this song called Obrigada, which is thank you in Portuguese. And it was a relaxed performance, and one of the kids in the audience, she's at the edge of the theater singing to the ocean, as it were. One of the kids in the audience came to the edge of the theater, to the edge of the stage where she was. And as she was sort of staged to have her hands out, the kid sort of just walked right into her hands. And then she ended up singing the song right into the child and just saying, thank you. And I'm so glad to be here. And the lyrics of it were it was a beautiful moment of like, here's the connection from one human to another in a moment of gratitude. And the whole cast on stage was just like, everyone was dying. And it was just a beautiful moment. I'll never forget it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I was thinking about a piece that I saw from Geordie Theatre Company out of Montreal. They're an English-speaking theatre company for young audiences, teens. Most of their work is for teens. And they did this piece called Jabber. And on the surface, it looked kind of like after-school special theater, And I was like, all right, let's go. Let's bring it. I'm ready. But Jabber refers to... it's a bit of a derogatory term that this particular high school would call girls who wore the hijab. And then the girls just kind of owned it. They're called jabbers, like we're the jabbers, right? And there was this story about a young girl who started having a relationship with a non-Muslim boy who was kind of a troublemaker in the school, but they were building a relationship, and there were these really precious texting and FaceTiming scenes in the show that were working. And I was like, I'm on it. And they had a conflict, and earlier before the conflict, in a moment of like intimacy, if you will, he asks her if she would take it off so he can just see her hair. And he takes a picture of her. And when they have a moment of conflict, he posts this picture of her all over the school. And the absolute devastation that this young girl felt. And it was crazy. I had never experienced something like that, certainly in my life, but that the way this piece landed in helped me understand what that article of clothing means to those girls, to that population. It was so profound, and I desperately wanted to bring it to Austin, and it was just there was a lot of concerns, a lot of question marks. It was it was a high school piece. It was mature. And it didn't happen, and it breaks my heart, but my breath was just, it was so powerful for me as an adult, and I was imagining what that would have been like for high school students to see that work.
Shavonne, do you have a quick one? Yeah?
It's so many. I don't know. I'm gonna say I'm gonna go from a different lens. So when I was in grad school and I was studying TYA, right? This is how I just started to begin to like dig into TYA. And we were reading the anthologies and things, and lots of the plays were, I think the moment for me where I was like, oh yes, is we read a couple of Gloria Clooney plays. And I just told her this a few days ago, but after that, I started calling her Auntie Gloria. She doesn't know that. She knows now, but because I told her. But the reason why is because I was going through, only a few years before that had I even heard the term TYA. And so I was starting to like learn TYA and navigate through this world. And I didn't hear stories that involve people who look like me, right? And I didn't hear stories coming from that were written by people who looked like me, right? And then there were certain things like aesthetically or meaning wise that just were never in the plays, right? Or like a lot of the stories that almost sounded like they might have something to do with me had to do with animals, right? Like I remember the first time I heard like Reynard the fox, I was like, Reynard, he's from Detroit, but Reynard's not from Detroit. So this moment of being able to read a couple of Gloria's plays, and then shortly after that, I don't think it was Zoom then because this was some years ago, but she Zoomed in, she video chatted in and talked to us, and we got to ask very specific questions. And she was like speaking about like her neighborhood or something, things that just inform, like just regular, like what you talk about with a playwright. But that impacted me such because it was a moment of like, oh yes, like I do belong here, right? Like, and there is space for my story, and then later my children's stories, right? And that, like, so it kind of flipped it on the side, right? It was like me pulling out this flower and like being like, oh, look at these roots. Like, okay, this is a root bound. I'm a plant person now during the pandemic. This is root bound. It's time to pick it up and put it in a new, larger pot. And that was the moment of like, let's repot this thing and let's get going. And so that's it.
Great. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for this panel. So lovely to share space with all of you, not only in this Zoom room, but also within the field. Very grateful. Make sure you join us tomorrow for our next panel, which will also be at 1 o'clock on representations of Blackness. We'll see you then.